Hi guys, today I'm going to talk about the resource efficient mining for blockchains. This is a new kind of consensus method that is proposed in a conference, and the conference name is it's 26 Usenix, and I read the paper and prepared for this presentation. Yeah, and if you keep up with my blog, you will see that I've been learning blockchains for quite time, and yeah, for later videos I will talk more about blockchains, and today I will talk this consensus algorithm, and this is just an improvement of proof of work, and there are many other kinds of consensus method, and yeah, I will also mention those consensus algorithm in this presentation. So yeah, so let's go. Okay, so we have to have some fundamental knowledge for blockchain, like what is blockchain. For right now, we can just make it simple and take it as a distributed ledger. Okay, so right now we just consider it's a ledger, and but for a ledger we will have those problems like who is going to keep and produce those transactions in this ledger, and if some attackers want to attack the ledger because we put this ledger in the network, how do we protect it? And since someone is going to record all those transactions, why those guys want to spend their time, their electricity in this system? This is all the problems, and this is solved by the consensus mechanism, like proof of work, proof of stake, DPoS, point, and RAM. Okay, all these things. So yeah, and in blockchain we have this problem, which is impossible trinity. So for every blockchain, well, the optimal condition will be these three condition with high safety and complete decentralization and high TPS. TPS means transaction per second, which means yes, just a speed of transaction. So so the problem we are having now is that we cannot have these three conditions both meet in one blockchain, and yeah, and for today, for our consensus method, which is resource efficient mining, it cannot meet these three requirements too. So yeah, we will just keep these three conditions in mind, and when we are going into the details about this consensus method, we will see what it means actually. And for Bitcoin proof of work, for those of you who may not may haven't looked at blockchain and proof of work on Bitcoin, I will explain this very quickly. And for in Bitcoin we have these blocks, right? The first block, second, and third, and so on. So for every block we got this block header, and after block header we have these transactions in the second part. Okay, so in the block header there is this very important parts, and I want to mention about the difficult target. So this difficult target is determine how the difficulty that a miner is going to mine a new to produce a new block. It has to for every mine it has to change this nonce, and to calculate the hash of the whole block header, and keep changing the nonce until the hash is less than the difficulty target. So and the hash is, I think, is made by, in blockchain I think it's SHA-256, and it will take that hash for twice, and yeah, so for every miner who is going to produce a blockchain, it will get a warrant for the Bitcoin, and right now it got one for 12.5 Bitcoin. And this amount of Bitcoin is going to decrease with time, and yeah. So how is going to get that Bitcoin? Because we know that in the second part of the block is all those transactions, and the first transaction is what we call coin-based transaction, and this transaction will set the target as a miner. The sender is a fixed address, so that transaction is going to award the miner. That's the first transaction in the block. So and also for those transactions, they have some transaction fees, and the miner also get a one with those transaction fees. But this is only a small part of the award of the miner. But as time goes by, that transaction fees part will that percent of the award will just increase, and I think maybe in I don't know how long, but it's like 20 or 30 years, the transaction fees will be the most part of the award that the miner is going to get. So the point here is that we're calculating that the nonce to make it less than their difficulty. So all those work are just not useful because those hashing are not helping us to accomplish anything except to get the nonce. So it's possible that we can make the work very useful, like we're calculating something useful, and we can still get to produce a new block. This is what we hope. Okay. So yes, that's about the blockchain, the basic idea of Bitcoin. And the next thing that about helped us to learn about the paper is SGX, which is Intel Software Guard Extension. So this is a set of central processing unit (CPU) instruction nodes from Intel. The basic idea is that it allows code to allocate private regions of memory. You see the right side here, and they are called enclaves. Okay, so they are protected from the other applications like the system or some higher privilege levels. Okay, so for like other process cannot access the memory in this enclave, but actually the enclave can access memory outside the enclave. So it's kind of like hardware protection on user level code, yeah, it can permit execution of trustworthy code in isolated tamper-free environment. So this is SGX, and there are two problems that in blockchain that are also mentioned here. It's a stealthy problem, which means that the miners may have a financial incentive to power mining rigs with cheap and automated SGX enabled CPUs, and the broken chip problem, which is that the attacker may compromise one CPU and may get win every consensus run and break the system, the whole blockchain system. Okay, so this is two problems, and at the end they also said that they solve these two problems. Yeah, and yeah, so since we mentioned about SGX, let's talk about the attestation process for SGX, because one important key feature of SGX and which is this consensus method is based on is that the SGX can allow a remote system to verify the software running in the enclave and communicate with it. So this is a very important feature of SGX, and let's see how it's going to produce that attestation. So the first we have got this enclave, and which this enclave will produce two things. The first is as a measurement. It's just a hash of the initial state of the CPU, and the second part of the data is the supplementary data, which is provided by the process running in the enclave. With these two parts, we can got a code which is signed by the hardware protected key, and this key is given by the Intel. So Intel give every CPU this hardware protected key and produces quote. Okay, so this is a proof that can be used to prove that certain software is running in the SGX enclave. So yeah, this is how it's going to be proved or verified. But one thing is that the code can only be verified by accessing the Intel's service, which is IAS, and so in order to verify this, you have to access this IAS service. Yeah, this is a problem. I will talk about this later, but right now we'll just take it and yeah. So based on SGX, Intel has already produced this new consensus method, which calls proof of elapsed time, and for this consensus method, every participant in the blockchain will wait for a random time, and the first one to awake is going to produce a new block. This can help us to save some electricity or something, but yeah, there's still problem with this, and because it's not using useful work, and for the like stale chip problem and broken chip problems and also issues. And for our today's focus is resource efficiency, efficient mining. Okay, so let's take a look at the whole process of this consensus method. So the first part is a useful work client. This is a client that gives a task, like because we're going to produce useful work, right? So the work comes from this useful work client, and then we got this blockchain agent. It's just listening to the whole blockchain and the whole blockchain network and get those a template and collect transactions it just gives a template to the miner. So the miner actually gets the useful task and the template, right? And going to produce proof of useful work, right? So it then just it will produce an enclave, and in the enclave it will run the useful work and determine whether the work is going to result in a block. If it is going to produce a block, it will generate this in two attestations: the attestation with the compliance with RAM and the attestation for the difficulty parameter. Okay, these are the two attestation that this miner is going to produce to let the other miners in this blockchain to believe that it actually produced the useful work legitimately, or just to have them to verify this block. Okay, so yeah, and it sends this into this agent, and this agent is locally, okay, so it's still locally a local agent, and get this previous work and actually produce that block and send it to the network, and the other blockchain agents will just receive this block and verify it, and if it's legitimate and it's legal, and it will just add this block to the whole blockchain. Okay, so this overview we will go into details later, but here is two very key assumptions that this whole consensus method is based on. The first is that it is going to believe that Intel assigns a signing key only to a valid CPU. Okay, so and the second is that so Intel doesn't block valid nodes in the network. These are two key assumptions that this whole project is based on. Yeah, we will talk about this later, but right now we think this is right. But yeah, because they really believe that Intel will do these things. I don't know. So there's some implementation details. Okay, so how it's going to, let's see the previous. So here, this miner, how it's going to determine whether it will result in a useful block. Okay, so The key idea is that it's going to calculate the instructions. Okay, so how many number of instructions, that's useful work. So they will divide the whole program into subtasks. So for every subtask, there are a certain number of instructions, and the miner is going to call this srng this call, which is in the SGX, to determine whether those instructions in the in one subtask is going to produce a block. If it's if there is a random number less than the difficulty, so this subtask will actually calculate just win, and it's going to produce a useful work. Okay, so yeah, this is the whole idea. So yeah, so this srng is a random call in the SGX, which provided by the SGX. We're not going to use the random system call provided by the system, because we are not trusting the system here. We only trust the SGX. Okay, so yeah. So the second problem is that how are we going to believe that one miner is going to calculate the instructions correctly? Because if we are going to count more instructions, you have more possibility to get a random number less than the difficulty, which means you have more possibility to produce a block, right? So we have to find some way to prove that the miner is doing exactly what we want is going to do. Okay, so the idea is that the authors are actually providing us with a tool chain that it can rewrite the program. So first we got some source code of program we want to run. So and we compare it with the tool chain that also provides, and that tool chain will reserve one register as counter. We see here is 15, right? This is a counter that is going to calculate the number of instructions, and we see that for every subtask is going to calculate the number of that subtask. Let's say this here is 3 instructions, and it will increase the register by 3. Okay, so this is how it's going to calculate that very securely. So, but there are some problems, because it's going to depend on this register. But what if that we can change this register, right? So we can write a program that is going to change this register, let's say just increase this register very quickly. It will just result in some attackers to succeedingly produce much more blocks. Okay, so the author actually provides this runtime shadow library, which as a in enclave loader. So it launches the enclave and collects the result. So all the process is done by this one, which is provided by the author, and and it uses srng. Okay, so since all these things depends on this proof of useful work shadow library, so it's much more safer for us to calculate it. This whole process here, and so and here is that for if we want to make sure that the miner is going to calculate the instruction correctly, we have to enforce these two things, because enforce non-writable code pages and enforce single threading, because these two things may help the miner to successfully change the register number. Because if we write a program that is going to change itself, that may result in it increasing that register and results in more possibility to produce the block. Okay, so we have to enforce these two things, and finally we are going to make sure that these things are all actually implemented in this block, and this is what they call hierarchical attestation. Okay, so the first attestation is this attestation for the money process. This is from the work enclave. Is here. Is this part, and this part is to make sure that the difficulty is set correctly. Otherwise, if the money is going to use a very small difficulty, it's going to produce more block, right? So the second is that it's going to use this compliance checker. This checker is going to make sure that the thing that we mentioned before is all implemented correctly in the block, like the text section is non-readable, which is what we mentioned just before, and the single threading thing, and the previous useful runtime is correctly linked and identical to the expected runtime code, which means that this prove or useful runtime is the place that is going to calculate the instruction number and all those things, right? So if this runtime is correctly linked, we can make sure that the agent is actually doing the right thing. It's correctly counting the instructions and it's not cheating here. So this is very key important, and this compliance checker is going to make sure that this is implemented correctly, and we are going to produce this measurement, right? So this measurement is just the measurement we mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, that SGX. We talk about how SGX works rather than there's measurement. So it will verify these things based on the SGX, and yeah. So in this case, we can make sure that the miner is actually doing the right thing. Okay, so let's see. I'm another also talk about the overhead of the resource efficient mining, and we can see that it's only like 10% or something higher. It's a small overhead. So the also want to say it's practical. Okay, so yeah. So also the author is going to use this threading mode to prove that even there is a SGX node compromised by an attacker, that attacker may not end up in producing more blocks than others, because using this mode, it can identify that attacker and just won't accept that that attacker, the blocks produced by that attacker. So the basic idea of this mode is that if a mine is too lucky, so its block will not be accepted. Okay, so but I haven't go to details about this model because I don't think they need this model. Okay, so I will talk about this later. Yeah. So conclusion is that they produce this proof useful work, and the overhead is small, which sounds like very practical. Okay, so there are other things I want to mention, so the first thing that I mentioned earlier is that every miner has to contact the IS to verify attestations, right? There are attestation provided by their by SGX. By SGX. Okay, so the important part is here. It has to contact the IIS, right? So if the IIS server fails, the whole network is going to broke. So this is single point fail. Okay, so for everything the network can serve from DDoS or man in the middle, also things. So this is problem. Okay. Yeah, and the second thing is that Intel has full control of the network, right? So I didn't go to the details about how they are going to verify that attestation in the IIS. Maybe the Intel hasn't even published those process in the server because they provide that server. They may don't want to give us a source code or something. But like Richard Stallman said, that we shouldn't believe in Intel because they have backdoors in CPUs, right? But since we know that it's an impossible trinity, we cannot meet these three conditions right now. in one blockchain consensus method. So I'm not going to blame the author for this, because this is still useful in some situation. Okay, for those companies who is going to believe in Intel, and yeah. So one thing that I'm still thinking about is that so the author, does the author really need that thread model? Because if you're going to watch the video of the author, okay, his presentation in the conference, we heard that the author said there might be some financial organizations that have no interest in creating a new coin. So which means that the author wants this blockchain is designed for those companies that don't have interest in creating a new coin. So in this case, what's the point of an attacker to accomplish or to compromise the blockchain? Okay, so for those attack events already happened in the blockchain, this blockchain forum. All those things are that attackers get compromise the blockchain and get the coins. Okay, so that's why the coins, the attackers want to get attack the blockchain. But for here, the author wants this blockchain is designed for those organizations that don't want to create a new coin. So I don't think they really need this thread model, because no attackers want to attack that. And if even though that attacker attacks that successfully compromise the blockchain, it cannot get a very valuable coins, and it gets nothing. So I think this is secure. They don't really need that thread model. And this blockchain can be used for like these things, like as I mentioned, if those companies really believe in Intel and want to put this whole system in the hand of Intel, I encourage them to use this blockchain method. Okay, yeah, that's basically what I think about this. But so what's going on in the blockchain world? As well, we've mentioned before, is Bitcoin proof of work, right? I've explained that consensus method at the beginning, and later, I think it's 2014 is the Ethereum, and Ethereum at first, right now Ethereum is still in the proof of work, but later it will going to turn to the proof of stake, which is that proof of stake is that every miner is going to hold a percentage of the stake. Okay, the percent of the, so a miner is going to buy some Ethereum. So this Ethereum is like the shells or something. It's just like a stake. So the miner is chosen to produce a new block based on the percents of the stake is holding. Okay, so this is a proof of stake, and it's not going to waste any money, any electricity. Okay, so later on it's going. There are some new blockchains like EOS, which is in dedicated proof of stake. So in this consent method is that we are going to select 21 nodes that's going to produce the block, and you are going to select the nodes based on the shells you are holding. So that's another consensus method, and there are many other consensus methods that we can go into. And right now it's just maybe later time, if I have time, I will talk about some other new consensus method. But right now it's just all these things. Yeah, I think this is the end of my presentation. Okay, so after all, this is still a good paper because it actually provides us some ideas about how we're going to improve the consensus method. And yeah, so one thing that I want to improve really in this consensus method is that if it can put the IS server local into every local miners is still useful. Okay, so if every miner can verify those attestations locally, that's really helpful. But I don't know much about the SGX, and I don't think Intel wants to do that. So yeah, that's about this blockchain. Okay. Yeah. Um, I think that's all because today's video is quite long. It's almost 30 minutes, and my previous videos are just like 10 minutes or very short videos. Today's video is longer, but I think this one is really interesting, and if I have a chance, I may talk about some other new consensus method in this area. Yeah, I will. Also talk about, if I have time, I will talk about how to find vulnerabilities in the blockchain and all those things, which is quite interesting. So yeah, that's all. Hope you have a great day. Thanks.